Jeff Marsocci, it's great to have you in the office. Let me just give you a brief intro, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing here today. Attorney Jeff Marsocci is with the law offices of Jeff Marsocci. Jeff, where is your practice located, and what do you do?
Well, I'm up in North Raleigh, kind of at just a little bit south of 540 and Six Forks, and we focused almost exclusively on estate planning, Medicaid planning, a little bit of estate administration. I'd say that's at least 95% of what we do, but that other 5% is sometimes I have clients that own a couple of rental properties and we need to do some corporate protection around that. But we do not do any kind of litigation. That's just not what we do. That's not where my passion is. Mine is avoiding all those problems.
So you don't do litigation. What is your focus? What is it that makes your practice, and what makes it unique to you?
Well, I think probably our biggest, quote, selling point is I talk to my clients in plain English.
Fantastic.
And sometimes estate planning can get to be complex because you're not just dealing with, what happens to your stuff when you pass on? What are the tax implications around that? What if you have beneficiaries that need to be protected? How do you put all of this together? Some of these trusts can be very intimidating for someone who's a non-lawyer to go through and read. We like to just be able to explain everything to our clients in plain English and give them the peace of mind that they're looking for.
Awesome. So plain English, what do you mean by plain English? I mean, as an attorney, I know what you mean. I know how complicated it can be, but can you tell someone who would be watching this who's been involved in a motor vehicle accident, how important it is to have an attorney that can make it easy to digest the complications and the legal jargon involved in needing an estate attorney or an estate plan?
Well, around the jargon, when we're attorneys talking to each other or talking to other people involved in the industry, and I guess it's for any profession, you start using jargon. You start using shorthand. Remember the Miller case, and according to that. And I've sometimes seen attorneys have that leak into their conversations with their clients, and their clients are almost afraid not to ask questions. What do you mean by the Miller case? So I've very strategically developed sticking to plain English when speaking with and communicating with my clients, so that they understand everything and it's not speaking to other attorneys or other professionals in the arena.
Do you see any negatives for doing it that way?
I mean, it saves time for attorneys to talk to each other that way, but I think my clients really appreciate that they can understand it when I'm explaining it in plain English.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as an attorney, you run your own practice. I mean, your name is clearly on the door.
Yes.
Describe your style. What makes you and your practice yours?
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to that, doing everything in plain English and speaking and communicating that way. The other thing is, what's unique about us is we do estate planning, Medicaid planning, and some estate administration. We're not doing, we can do some divorce work on the side. We can do some real estate. I've really immersed myself in the planning area. And I think when people are looking for someone, they're looking for someone who's got a lot of knowledge in that area and can communicate that knowledge very clearly. I've written several books on some of the more complicated topics so that they can read them ahead of sitting down with me.
Fantastic. And I think speaking to your style, we did a little bit of background digging into who you are. We don't just let any John Doe come on the show with us. And I stumbled upon your Twitter account, and I think the best evidence of who you are is your Twitter handle.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
No, you're gonna have to tell me.
It's been a minute. I believe it's The Estate Geek. When I saw that, it just resonated with me. It's like, this guy loves estate law so much that he actually sorts out that Twitter handle and he is owning it and he's tweeting regularly and his clients are communicating with him, but he's definitely understands that this is his passion. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, and I have to give credit to an insurance agent who said, we were talking business, and he said, when I have to send my clients to someone, I don't want to send them to a mechanic who maybe they could work on my car, on my Honda, or I want an accountant who does a whole lot of business stuff and maybe they could do a personal. It's like, I want my estate planning done I want the estate geek. I want the person who digs deep into this and understands everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to just hire, the estate casual guy, the casual estate attorney. I believe that Twitter account may have been taken by some other Raleigh lawyer.
Probably.
But yeah, I bet. So tell me about this book. And I believe the one that I found online, I know you've written several, but the one that stood out to me just by the title, and maybe I shouldn't be picking books by their titles, and there's a lesson in there somewhere, but The Anti-Probate Revolution.
Okay.
That is super catchy title. Tell me what I can get if I picked up that book and I was reading the inside dust jacket.
Well, we're talking about how do you avoid the court process of probate. Again, it's getting back to my whole passion of trying to avoid complications for my clients. Too often, people just go ahead with a simple will, and sometimes, God forbid, they download it and try to do it themselves. And then their estate ends up getting into a court process called probate. Now, the way I describe it, probate is just a massive, time-consuming, sometimes expensive process to retitle assets from a deceased person into the beneficiary's name. And they want all different kinds of documentation and proof to go along with it. Oh, was this check for $98.17 actually to pay this bill, or did the executor somehow or another steal that money? So we want to see that it's on the bank statement. We want to see the invoice. We want to see the canceled check. And all of that documentation has to get submitted to the court for approval.
That sounds like a terrible process.
It's a massive process. And it was probably,
I love how you just took my negative words and you just turned to say, well, it's a massive process as opposed to a terrible process.
Right. Well, but it's very well meaning in that they want to make sure that nobody's stealing money. And if you really think it's a burdensome process, and it is, it's because people were stealing money.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got something in a revocable trust, which is one of the things we talk about in that book quite a bit, it's taking it out of that court process. So if you really, really trust that your trustee is not going to end up stealing your money from your beneficiaries, well, then you can go with a much simpler process of just making sure you've got a balance sheet and everything's fine.
So how would an accident victim utilize someone like you, an attorney like you, after an accident? Let's maybe give a hypothetical, or maybe a couple hypotheticals. Someone's involved in a serious motor vehicle accident. It's a catastrophic injury to a loved one, and that person can no longer make their own decisions. I think that's a very different situation as opposed to a catastrophic injury where someone can make their own decisions but may have some disabilities as a result of the accident. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, we have to assess whether or not they're able to execute their own documents,
Gotcha.
and that's the big thing. And it comes down to testamentary capacity. I don't want to get too technical. Look, if you know who you are, you know who your immediate family is, you know who your kids are, and you know what you're doing with these documents, and essentially for a will, okay, where is my stuff going to go if I die? If you have that much capacity, all right, you can execute the documents that we're talking about. And then we can put in place a healthcare power of attorney, a financial power of attorney. We can put together the will or do a trust, and we can line all these people up. How would that help an
accident victim, though? Those documents, what would that be doing for them?
If they're going to end up potentially getting worse down the road, and then they fall into where they can't make any of those decisions for themselves. Now, sometimes we're able for accident victims, because they've already executed a power of attorney, someone else can actually set up some of these documents, and we can move their assets in such a way that they're going to qualify for whatever benefits they're going to be entitled to. One of the biggest things that we do in the Medicaid planning end, even if it's not an accident victim, just someone's a senior and they get dementia, all right, we can move their assets into these trusts, get the 5-year clock going for Medicaid, and some other benefits, it's not even a 5-year clock, or we can do some strategies so they're entitled to those benefits without losing everything else.
Gotcha. So you've mentioned you've got a passion for this, and I don't want to show how much of an estate geek I'm not. I clearly went to law school, and I've never practiced estate law, and I know what testamentary capacity is. I understand the intricacies of why it's important, but I want to switch to you for a second. Mm-hmm. What made you write this book? I mean, I don't imagine that would be a simple task.
Well, yeah, the first book is always the most difficult. There are multiple books. Wow. The first one is always the most difficult. I did a lot of research. The first book actually was estate planning for domestic partners. And this is going back before we had those marriage equality decisions. And it was how can couples, same gender couples, who at that point could not legally marry, how do they get most of the benefits of marriage that they're looking for? So I did a lot of analyzing. I did a lot of putting together in as simple a format as I could. Here are all the rights that we can get through things like powers of attorney and doing a joint trust, but we have to do it in such a way it's not tripping up the gift. I put a lot of research. That took me about a year to do.
Wow.
After that, I realized, you know what? For the type of books that I'm doing, it could probably be done a lot more quickly and a lot more simply if I just told the stories. And if I listed out just very basically and spoke it and wrote it almost the same way. So in a lot of these cases, when I'm looking through and writing the book, I'm imagining myself just talking to my clients. And that's kind of been the rule of thumb on some of these books that I put together. It's, all right, if I have to explain it more than 3 times in 1 week and it takes more than 15 minutes to explain, it's probably worth putting together anywhere from a 60 to 120 page book so that I can just hand them the book, let them read through it, and really absorb it.
So you're imagining yourself talking to these clients, and you're imagining yourself answering their questions. What kind of questions should these clients or even accident victim clients be asking their estate attorney?
Well, I think they should be asking, what do I need to do to protect everything that I have? What can I do to maximize the benefits for me? And at the next stage, after I'm gone, how are we going to benefit the family?
Gotcha. And don't forget Mr. Ruffles, right? I mean, the family dog, that's a big deal.
You'd be shocked at how many of my clients put that as one of their top priorities. Without giving any names, we recently put together a whole plan and just got it signed a little while ago for a husband and wife. They don't have kids, but they have 13 cats.
Wow.
And they need to make sure that they're cared for and placed, and it's not a quick process.
Yeah, it's an honorary trust for pets. Is that what it's called?
Well, they typically call them a pet trust.
Gotcha.
But in a lot of those cases, they're really trying to make sure the pet's taken care of by specific people and the money stays there and gets sent out in drips and drabs to pay for bills. This particular client just wanted to make sure that they got placed somewhere with the sum of money. But it was the primary thing.
Yeah. So at the risk of making the dad joke of the year, that sounds like a hairy business.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine having to deal with that. But what kind of questions should car accident victims be asking their estate attorney or you if they came and saw you?
Well, I think it's a lot more about what do you need to do to protect what you have.
Is a function of what you have is a function of what kind of questions you should be asking as well?
Right. Because it's how do you protect the fact that you've got a house and maybe another home. If you're talking about Medicaid and a lot of the other federal programs, you can keep your residence, but that extra piece of property is definitely a no-go. They're not going to give you the benefits if you have more than one piece of property. One case going way back, they had 1/10 of an acre of land on the side of a mountain. It was basically unsellable. I have no idea how it came into the family to begin with, but we had to have a cousin buy that for a couple of $100s because it was holding up the whole thing. So,
wow.
Yeah, the one thing that I do highly recommend when you're talking about benefits, don't hide anything from the attorney.
Or have a rich cousin.
Yeah, well, or have a rich
or maybe
cousin.
a cousin with a couple $100s.
Yeah. Here's one technique that I know for a fact does not work. Take all your money out of the bank and put it into coffee cans and bury it in the backyard. They know that money came out, believe me.
I can't imagine what it would be like to deal with situations like that. So let's switch gears and talk about you and your practice a little more. Where do you see your practice in the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
Well, I think we have a very natural progression that we're looking for. We are probably going to add a little more staff over time.
How many staff members do you currently have?
Well, currently we have 3 people who are almost full-time, 1 full-time person. We have a legal assistant, we have a marketing person, and then we have the office manager. And at some point, we're probably going to add another legal assistant. And from there, we may end up eventually adding another attorney, and then I'll develop another office. I have a very small office in Asheville where I'm working with a financial advisor. He gives me space. We work on clients together. But building up a practice there and spending a little bit of more time there is something that I would probably enjoy. Yeah,
Asheville is quite lovely, and I have to admit I'm a little jealous that you get to go as often as you do. So you're looking at this natural progression of growing your practice, opening some more offices, and obviously effective client communication and solid representation is a factor of doing that. Who is your ideal client? Who is someone that you could actually assist? What does that person look like? Where are they? What are they doing right now?
Okay. Well, when you're looking at demographics, it's not so much about the demographics. Where I find a lot of my clients coming in is they've experienced the death of a friend or family member, a loved one within the last few years, and they see the results of either not planning or poor planning. They're ready to sit down and actually do something. In that vein, we have a lot of clients coming in. In fact, just today, yes, we've been meaning to do this for the last year and a half, but now I am 8 months pregnant with my second child. I've got to put something in place because right now we don't have anything. Another is, well, I'm about a year to a year and a half to retirement. And I've been told over and over again by my financial advisor, I need to get my estate plan in order.
Yeah.
Another instance, I have a child. They have autism. They've turned 18 now. They're receiving disability. They're receiving Medicaid. They can work 15 hours a week, but no more than that. I've got to make sure that when I pass on, that I'm not leaving them all my money so that they get kicked off their benefits. But at the same time, I want that money to be there to help them. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And then I get occasionally the clients in their 80s. Yeah, I never did this. It's probably about time.
So you meet these folks, you sit down, you get a sense of who they are, what they're about, what they're trying to accomplish. How do you measure success for what you're doing with your clients?
If they have that great sigh of relief on the way out the door after signing everything, after they've gone through most of the process, and you can see that a weight's been lifted.
Yeah.
I had one client many years ago. He was so worried and so concerned about what was going on. He wanted to leave everything to his wife, but he knew and didn't trust her side of the family because they would talk her out of all the money. He actually worried himself into a heart attack, and we had to put off the meeting for several months. But you really saw the relief even after the first meeting, and I said, yes, we can help you.
That's brilliant.
Those are the instances that I measure success by.
Fantastic. And imagine if you are any fallible human being, such as myself, there have been instances where things haven't gone according to plan. Have you ever been in a situation where you've not successfully represented a client? And if so, why has the representation not been successful? Obviously, we don't want to get into confidential information, but for us, we find that clear lines of communication are important. Outside of good communication, what causes a relationship between an estate attorney and an estate client to fail?
Well, we really try to be in tune with our clients, and we try to avoid any mistakes. I'd say where things have broken down is something has happened between them engaging us and the plan getting fully executed that changes their whole attitude. Gotcha. And maybe they end up being a little more, I'd say maybe not belligerent, but disagreeable. and then they don't want to follow through on certain tasks. Probably one of the biggest drawbacks is we go ahead, we put together these great plans and we discuss with our clients, how do you need to title your accounts? How do you need to set up the pay on death beneficiaries so this whole thing just works together? And maybe they do have that great sigh of relief when they walk out the door, but then they don't come in for their annual meetings. 6, 7, 8, 9 years go by, and then it's the kids coming in, oh, they've passed on. And we find out they hardly did any of that other work that they were supposed to do. Wow. And now a lot of stuff has to go through probate.
Gotcha.
My clients that I enjoy working with the most are the ones who will come in every year just to get updated, just tell me what's going on in their life. They understand the importance
of it as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. So, if a client listening to this or watching this on our social media, on our website, were to pick up the phone, call your office, get hold of your support staff, and eventually get connected to you after we're done recording this.
Right.
What would they expect if they worked with you and your team?
Okay. Well, we have a very defined process which gives as much information with as little time as possible. So if they want to sit down, we always do the first hour and a half for free, but their price of admission to get the free meeting is they've got to read the book that we send them and fill out the questionnaire and send it in to us.
Wow.
That means when they get through this book, and it's only about 70 pages, once they get through the book, they know about the different documents, what they do, what are some of the bigger issues. So one of the first things we get to talk about is what their goals are, not what's the difference between a will and a trust, or tell me about the probate process. All that stuff's in the book. We can immediately jump to what do you need to have done? What do you want to accomplish?
Wow. Do you find that a lot of folks make contact and find the process too onerous of reading, doing a questionnaire, and throw up their hands in frustration and say, you know what, maybe I should go down to Staples and buy that, will in a box?
Well, the questionnaire isn't that extensive. It's not that complicated.
Perfect.
When we're talking about their assets, we're only looking for round numbers. I find if they're throwing their hands up, they're probably not really serious about getting it done in the first place, and then they may not just be a fit for us.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. I think that goes and speaks to just knowing who you need to work with and working with people that understand the importance of adequate legal representation.
Right.
Absolutely. So let's switch gears here for a little bit and get a little personal. What non-law related topic do you consider yourself an aficionado of or an expert in?
Oh. Well, this is actually the topic of the next book that's going to be completely non-legal.
So look, we'll stop recording. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're not.
Okay.
Tell us what you're an expert in. What can we expect to be in this book?
Well, one of my passions is working with the college group Circle K. They're a service organization. They're a member of the Kiwanis family. So if you're familiar with Kiwanis, this is a college level program. I've been working with the group at NC State going back to 2000, so it's 19 years now that I've been working with them. And I focus a lot on leadership development with the students as they're coming in. They're becoming committee chair people or they're becoming the officers. I go through strategic planning, and I just love seeing them take up these lessons and then succeed in life. Strategic planning is something that you don't normally get. You certainly don't get it in high school. You don't always get it in college unless you're a business major. But I had a former student was telling me, because she went through this strategic planning process where we go through a whole weekend, and she went to her internship back home in New Jersey, and it was a summer internship. Her and 14 other students, and it was a big company. I'm not going to give the name.
Sure.
But they were going through 2 days of orientation as the new interns, and one of the senior vice presidents came down to talk to them, and they had a break. And she's talking with the manager and the senior VP, and they're talking about the company's new vision statement. And she said, that sounds a lot more like a mission statement. And they just stopped, and they looked at her, and they said, you know this stuff? And she's like, Oh yeah, I've done this with Circle K, and we just went through this with our club and with our district, and yeah, this is good. It's good stuff.
So what does the club actually try attempting to do?
Well, they're doing community service.
Fantastic.
But the point on this story is, she came in the next day, and they pulled her into an empty office, and she's like, "Oh my God, am I getting fired on my second day?" They said, "You're in charge of the 14 other interns." So it was because of those leadership lessons that she ended up kind of getting a promotion on her second day at work. Wow. That's the stuff, the passion that I like seeing. That's how I measure success on the non-legal side.
Fantastic. And are there any topics, again, not law related, that you're curious about, that you're researching, that you're interested in, that you find novel? Whether it's tech related, or maybe you're a cobbler on the side and you like making shoes. I don't know.
Well,
tell us about you.
The Circle K year is the academic year. Kind of almost perfectly off the academic year is the Durham Bowl season.
Oh,
so
okay.
I've kind of given myself the luxury of following this one team in this one sport in AAA baseball. And if you ask me, obviously you're keeping track of what's going on with this guy in the Baltimore Orioles. I have no idea what you're talking about. But the Durham Bulls is a passion. We have season tickets, and my wife and I really enjoy going out there. She enjoys it a lot more than I thought she would initially.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah.
How many games? I mean, I know the Durham Bulls, they play a lot of games in a season.
Well, yeah, they've been cutting it back a little bit, but it's 70 home games this year.
Wow. How many of those do you make?
We try to make all 70.
Wow.
I know we don't. Usually it ends up being somewhere between 55 and 60.
That is a commitment.
But yeah, it is a commitment. But we have friends. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Fever Pitch about the Boston Red Sox, and it's like, oh, this is their summer family. They all kind of know each other, and from the first game all the way through whatever playoffs they're in, they're all sitting together and they get to know each other. We have our Durham Bulls family, so it's a social thing for us too. We get
Fantastic.
to go out and see them and see their kids. And one friend, we went out to his first pitching performance in varsity high school baseball.
Wow.
The other night, it ended up getting into below freezing, and we were sitting there with our teeth chattering, but we enjoyed going out nonetheless.
That's awesome. So, are you originally from the Durham area?
Well, originally, I'm from the Fort Worth, Texas. Okay. That's where I was born. My father was in the military down there. He was a doctor at Lackland Air Force Base, and that's where I spent the first year and a half of my life. So I don't remember anything about that. But then I grew up in Rhode Island, and that's where the family's from.
Gotcha.
Went to school in New York, and then just kind of kept going south and ended up in Raleigh about 23 years ago.
I hope there's no plans to go any further south.
Probably not.
Good. Yeah. So why the Durham Bulls? I mean, there's a lot of decent baseball within a couple hours, maybe 5 or 6 hours of Raleigh. Durham Bulls AA, if I'm not mistaken.
They're AAA, so they're just below the Tampa Bay Rays.
Why Durham Bulls?
We were looking to do it as kind of a business thing.
Wow.
So we have 4 seats. We invite clients out and other professionals for networking, but it's just an enjoyable experience all Fantastic. The same. And it was that or the Mudcats, and they're both great. They're both great experiences. It's just Durham was a little bit closer and the stadium a little bit nicer.
So, look, nobody's listening. Nobody's watching. Have you ever snuck a beer into the Durham Bulls Stadium? Because at $14 a beer, that may be a costly experience to go 60 times.
No, honestly, I can say I have never had to sneak a beer into the stadium. If I were going to sneak anything, it would probably be Jack Daniels.
Which your wife snuck for you, correct?
Wow.
So we've talked about your passions and what you love doing and how that's impacted people's lives in the positive. What are you not good at? And again, I'm not really interested in talking about the law. You as a person, where do you want to find improvements in yourself, whether it's a hobby or a sport? What are you just generally terrible at?
Well, I think it does kind of come back just a little bit to the law, and it's following up on detail stuff, which is why I'm immensely happy with my staff. It's some of the fine details that have to be done a couple of weeks later or a couple of months later that I'm glad my staff follows up and does this stuff for me. Now, thankfully, I see in myself enough that I know this is not a strong area for me, but it's going to be covered by my team.
Fantastic.
And I guess you can probably go with that in my life too. If I didn't have my phone to remind me to do something, I'd probably forget to do it.
So, where did you go to law school? I'm sorry, I didn't ask that question earlier.
Well, I went to undergrad and law school at Hofstra University up in Hempstead, New York.
Fantastic. And what exactly brought you to Raleigh?
Honestly, I'm going to tell you, I didn't want to necessarily work for anybody else. I wanted to be a business owner as much as I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
And back in 1996, when we were starting to look around at what areas would be good for this, the Triangle area was booming. So was the Denver Boulder area. And I had decided I had enough snow. So we took a look at the area. My wife has some cousins in the area. And so family was close, but not right next door.
Yeah.
So this is where we decided to move. We moved to Raleigh.
Very strategic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a great area. Absolutely obsessed with the Raleigh-Durham area. It has absolutely everything you could ever want to do. The weather's great. It is strategically positioned between the mountains and the beach, or neither, if you don't want to go for a little staycation. But I've lived now in the Raleigh-Durham area for, I think this is my 18th year since moving from South Africa, and I couldn't want to leave it if I tried. No plans to. But the nature of practicing law is you kind of want to get your boots on the ground. You get a sense of who the people you are that you represent, and there's some affinity there that just seems to connect. There are very many moments where I leave the office and it's just, man, like I got a sense that I did something today, but these are also the people that are in my community. Right. I would say that's probably, what gets me going the next day, having that feeling, having that thought. Anyway, let's move right along. What is your best story from practicing law? Tell me something that's hilarious or exciting that has come out of practicing law. And again, please, protect the identity of the guilty or the innocent as best you can.
Well, I often tell the story of why it's important to do your planning the right way. It came down to, I'm just going to use first names, and protecting the identity. Well, look, all of this stuff ended up in probate, which is public anyway, so there's nothing I'm revealing there. A client of mine that I did planning for, his name was Harry. He called me one day and he said, Jeff, I need your help. It's not for my estate, but I've been trying to get my friend to come in and do his planning. He's single, no kids. And I was just playing golf with him the other day. We worked together, and after the golf game, we typically go into the restaurant, and he just said, I don't feel too good. I'm just going to go home. And then 5 minutes later, the waitress is coming in and she's like, you got to come out into the parking lot. And there was his friend, Charlie, dead behind the wheel of the car, foot on the brake. He was 57 years old and he had never done any planning. And he said, I'm at work. Everybody's looking at me like, what are we supposed to do with this 401k? What do we do with this final paycheck? I don't know, but we got to do something. So we looked in and we saw who's his family members, because he didn't have even the most simple will. Parents are both dead. He has a sister up in New Jersey. Wow. All right, we contact the sister. She comes down. We put the paperwork together. She says, I don't want to do this. Can Harry do it? All right, fine. So Patricia signed all the paperwork so Harry could be the administrator of the estate. And there was a wrinkle to this. Apparently, Dad's estate was still open in New Jersey, and half of that belonged to Charlie. So we couldn't settle Charlie's estate until the Dad's estate poured into his estate.
Wow.
And then a couple of weeks later, Harry calls me and he says, you're not going to believe this. Apparently, Patricia was staying in his apartment. She's a smoker and she didn't put the cigarette out.
Oh, no. Don't tell me.
And the couch caught on fire and it suffocated her in her sleep. And so she dies. And then suddenly all the cousins start coming out of the woodwork saying, I want Charlie's car. I want this that belongs to Charlie. I want this. And I had to explain to them, look, none of you are Charlie's heirs. You're Patricia's heirs.
Yeah.
We can't get stuff to you. We can only get stuff to Patricia's estate. So you should probably get an attorney up in New Jersey where she was a resident to set up an estate for her. When we get the half of the dad's estate and we combine it with Charlie's estate, then we will take it and turn it over to Patricia's estate. And it was all because nobody had done anything efficiently. And this probably took years. And it ended up being in a fight. It's like my childhood coming back.
Best and worst movie. What do you got for me?
Oh, you mean just out of the Marvel?
No, out of anything. What do you think is the very best movie ever made so I can judge you quietly? And then the very worst movie so I can judge you quietly as well.
Okay. Well, in terms of best movie all time for me, I was on the college newspaper and I was on the law school newspaper, so I'd have to go with All the President's Men about the whole Watergate scandal. Worst movie. I don't know if I've seen so many bad movies. I don't know if I can narrow it down. Generally, I don't have too much of an affinity for romantic comedies. The one that I already mentioned kind of tricked you into liking it was Fever Pitch. It really was a romantic comedy, but it was about the Boston Red Sox experience, which, okay, I grew up in Rhode Island, so I was a Boston Red Sox fan. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that I think as a genre, rom-coms, romantic comedies, something about them and the drama that they build into them just as an attorney just causes me not to want to watch. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Like romantic comedy is just a terrible
it's just
genre.
Not me.
It's just not designed for us. Yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at that. So let me end the podcast by asking you the question that I ask everyone: what's something that I have failed to ask you, but I should have?
Ooh. That's a tough one because we've talked about so many great things.
Yeah, and if there's not anything, feel free to let us know anything else that you want to say or something about where folks can contact you or find you as a way of signing off if there's not anything else that you want to add.
Okay. One of the things that my clients sometimes ask is, why did I get into this area of law to begin with? And really, I have to credit the estate planning for one grandmother and the Medicaid planning for my other grandmother. Wow. One of my grandmother that my father's side, after my grandfather died, he died a couple of weeks before I went away to law school, and apparently not everything was sewn up as tightly as they thought. And so my grandmother was calling me and asking me legal questions, and I'm running around the law library trying to figure things out because she was getting a bill every time she asked the lawyer. So that kind of led me into revocable trust because I read this great book called The Living Trust by Henry W. Apps III. Unfortunately, he passed on a couple of years ago while he was in the process of updating it. So the latest edition, I think, is 2003, but it's still a really good book if you can get past some of the tax numbers that are in there. On the other side, my grandmother started losing her memory just as I was going away to undergrad. And then it just got progressively worse to the point where my uncle and my grandfather kind of had to keep the doors locked. She couldn't get out of the house except into the yard, and they had fenced in the whole backyard so she couldn't get out.
Wow.
And eventually she just started climbing out the windows and flagging down cars in traffic, and the police said, you have to do something or we will have to do it. So she ended up in a facility, and she was extremely healthy for 7.5 years, except she needed that supervision.
Yeah.
So that would have completely devastated the family if they hadn't gone to an attorney that did Medicaid planning, and I saw what he was able to do. And they were living in the house that my great-grandfather built with his own hands, just a couple of blocks from the beach. That house is still in the family. It belongs to my cousins now. They didn't have to lose it just to take care of grandma. So those kind of inspired me to get into those areas of law, and that's where I am today.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, it's been my pleasure to chat to you and for you to be so real and share so many terrifying and also fun stories, and telling us about your practice and what you've got going on. Where can people find you? How can they reach you?
Well, they can always call the law office, 919-844-7993, or they can visit us on the web, www.livingtrustlawfirm.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. It's been a real treat.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.